An almost unimaginable milestone in the pandemic, coming as the first vaccine approval in the U.S., appears to be imminent. That amid some troubling concerns about vaccines and allergies, and a landmark antitrust case against Facebook. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Thursday, December 10th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
Hey, Jill. Hey, look, 10 days until the days start getting longer. That's something to be thankful for, right? We're almost there.
It is. And yesterday we got our first snow out here on Long Island. I don't know if you had any
Oh, we
snow in the
did.
city, but it was kind of nice.
I always sort of laugh when it snows for the first time in the Northeast because people like on the street start to like look around. They're like, "Oh my God, it's snowing!" It's like, yeah, it happens every year, people. But it is kind of nice. It is nice, especially in the beginning, because by the end of even by the middle of the winter, you're like, "Get this stuff out of here," right?
Yeah, so I actually, very quick story just to show you that I'm losing my mind. I had ordered a food delivery, a supermarket delivery, and I accidentally, because we used to live with our in-laws, I accidentally got it delivered to their house instead of
Oh, I've
ours.
been
So I
there.
had to go and pick up all of our food. So I was coming home from there when I and I pulled into my driveway, and it was almost like disbelief. I would like looked up and I'm like, "What is this white stuff coming from the sky?" And then it's almost like I went on Twitter for validation that in fact it was snowing. It's just such a bizarre
That says
time that
something.
we are living in.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's get to some news here. More than 3,000 Americans died of the coronavirus yesterday. That is the first time the death toll has crossed that terrible milestone. Hospitalizations now at a record 107,000 in this country. According to new federal geographic data on hospitalizations released this week, 1 in 10 Americans live in an area where ICU beds are either at or approaching capacity. A full third of the population lives in an area where fewer than 15% of beds are now available. Normally, hospitals, by the way, like to keep about 50% of their ICU beds open. In some areas now, hospitals have started to put hospital beds in the parking lots. So that is how dire it is in certain areas. And I almost think that those numbers underestimate. I think that they overestimate populations in New York, for example, where I think we're
Yeah.
doing a little better right now in terms of hospitals. But across most of this country, they're in a serious position when it comes to hospital beds.
Well, yeah, I mean, Jill, think about it, right? You and I are probably each within 10 miles of what, half a dozen hospitals? I mean, if you're living in rural America, you don't have that sort of hospital capacity. There's like the hospital, and if it's full, there's nowhere else to go. These numbers are just we were trying to, to make some light of the situation earlier, and it's hard to do that because this is just so depressing. I mean, I'm reminded of this old Russian joke. I don't know if anyone else has ever heard it, but it's like, how are you doing today? Worse than yesterday, but better than tomorrow. I don't know why I thought of that, but it sort of feels like appropriate for this situation right now. I mean, these numbers are straight up catastrophic. There's really no other way to put it. We are losing more people than died on 9/11 now every single day. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And the White House had a Hanukkah party last night, so that's cool. I mean, I talk about living in two Americas, right? Like what?
Well, it's not funny you say that, but I was thinking about the numbers today, and it's like I think we haven't seen anything yet. I mean, I think that we're first seeing the numbers go up from the Thanksgiving holiday. We've
Yep.
got Christmas, we've got New Year's, we've people traveling. So I just think, unfortunately, that Russian joke might prove to be pretty accurate. The FDA, by the way, meeting today to consider an emergency authorization for the Pfizer vaccine, the last hurdle before an approval that could come as soon as tomorrow. The FDA meeting is happening as regulators in the UK warned that people who have a history of severe allergic reactions, both food and environmental, should not get the Pfizer shot for now because they're looking into 2 reports of reactions that occurred during the vaccinations this week. The FDA panel here in the US is going to pick apart all of the data, and it's actually going to be live streamed to increase transparency to the public.
That's smart, I think. Yeah, it starts at 9 a.m. They'll live stream it at fda.gov if you want to watch. But we'll of course recap it tomorrow. Jill, I heard from a few folks. both listeners to the podcast, but also just people in my life, like in my social circles, about some hesitancy to take one of these vaccines. These are, and I'm not talking, these aren't anti-vaxxers, right? These are just regular, people who pay attention to the news and are just a little bit antsy about this. And basically, the line is the same, right? They're saying, how could something slapped together this quickly possibly be safe, or how could we even know whether it's safe? So I just wanted to quickly address that because those are valid questions, and I think the media should acknowledge that fear is out there. It's not the same as people who say, like, vaccines cause autism, or I don't want to vaccinate my children against anything. This is something very different than that. If it makes you feel any better, I mean, this is sort of how I think about it myself, which is just in terms of money and capitalism, right? If you're the CEO of Pfizer or Moderna and you're rushing through a product that you aren't absolutely sure is going to be not just effective but safe, in this situation with the literal eyes of the world on you, you would essentially be destroying your company if you did that. You wouldn't be able to recover. So, putting aside the altruism of it and helping people, the simple cost benefit analysis in this scenario from a corporate perspective works in our favor here. These companies simply cannot afford to mess this up. And maybe it sounds a little weird to say that, but that actually gives me some comfort that these vaccines really are safe.
I do find the allergy news troubling. I posed
Yeah.
the question on Twitter because it's a little confusing to me as a mom who has a daughter with severe food allergies. It just is confusing how, after testing tens of thousands of people in a clinical trial, they then administer this vaccine to a couple hundred, if that, and
Yeah.
two out of those get these severe anaphylactic reactions, according to reports. And I posed that question on Twitter. A couple of doctors wrote me back. One said he did not believe that the clinical trials actually included people with severe allergies. And another said, just wait, right? They need time to figure out exactly what happened. Don't jump to any conclusions.
Right.
They're being overly cautious. But I do find that troubling. And I also, Carlo, don't think that we could underestimate the skepticism, in the Black community surrounding the vaccines.
Sure.
Especially when we know that people of color in this country and minorities have been so affected by this virus more so than the general population. So I don't think we can
That's a good point.
underestimate the skepticism that's out there. And I think you're right to say it's not the typical anti-vaxxers. And I have a friend who wants to have another baby, and I asked her, a friend actually said to me, "What do you think? Are you going to get the vaccine?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." And she's like, "I don't know. Like, I want to have another kid soon. I don't know how I feel about it, because it is this new technology." So I think there are real concerns that I don't think should be brushed off as just anti-vaxxers.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. I do think that, I mean, one of the good things about the vaccine not really being available yet is you don't really have this issue because you can't get the vaccine yet. So as people get it and people get sick or don't get sick, yeah, I think that's going to go a long way to getting people into the mindset that this is a safe vaccine. On sort of a different note, but related note, there was a really interesting story in Bloomberg yesterday about office workers that they surveyed who don't want to go back. Pew Research did a study and found that more than half of office workers say that they want to keep their remote arrangements in some capacity, even after they're vaccinated. Really interesting. So this is going to be just a sort of a fascinating thread to watch over the next 6 months or so. Do companies force their people back at some point? Do they say, look, you get the vaccine and get back to your desk? I know we've talked about this like a billion times over the last 6 or 9 months, but I find it really interesting.
Are you excited to get back to the office, Carlo?
I personally am, just because I miss like the social interaction.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people don't feel that way, and I respect that.
The other big story this morning, the US government asking the courts to force Facebook to sell off Instagram and WhatsApp. It's the focal point of one of two landmark antitrust cases that were filed by the FTC and a group of state attorneys general against Facebook. Federal regulators are arguing that Facebook abused its market power by snatching up smaller competitors. Facebook argues that there's plenty of competition in social media and notes that the government already signed off on those two acquisitions when they happened. The suits will begin a long legal battle over whether Facebook is an illegal monopoly.
Yeah, we sort of knew this was coming, and it came. But I have to say, it was shocking that the Fed's straight up asking Facebook to divest Instagram and WhatsApp. That's the big deal here. Usually, they're much more like mealy mouthed about this thing, but the FTC lawsuit straight up says like we demand that they unwind these two acquisitions. My feelings on Facebook, I think, are pretty clear at this point. They are too big, and they need to be regulated in a serious way. But I have to say, I think the company sort of made a good point in its response to this that they put out last night. The FTC did sign off on those deals way back in the day in the Obama years. So, is every acquisition now subject to sort of like after the fact regulatory approval if the acquirer gets too big? I think that's a really interesting question for debate. But yeah, this is going to go on forever. This is one of those stories that it's not like there's going to be some sort of like, settlement or deal reached in even like the coming year. Like this is a years long lawsuit, but it is a landmark case and it's a big deal for sure.
And it's going to be interesting to see how the Biden administration handles it.
Yeah.
So Democrats and Republicans both have beef with big tech, but the beef is over different things, so to speak. So I'm
I
definitely
heard
going to be
someone say
watching
yesterday.
the tone to big tech.
Yeah, I heard someone say yesterday that anytime you have something that is agreed on by both AOC on the left and Josh Hawley on the right, the senator from Missouri, that's a safe bet that something needs to be done. And this is one of those situations where they both came out and were like, "Good, Facebook needs to be regulated."
Meanwhile, shares of DoorDash skyrocketed in the company's public debut, closing higher by 85% on the first day of trading. DoorDash started the day with a valuation of about $38 billion and ended the day worth $60 billion. And now it's Airbnb's turn at the IPO bonanza. The home rental company goes public on the NASDAQ today. It's priced its shares at $68 each. That happened last night. So that values the company at $47 billion, which would make it the biggest IPO of the year. Carlo, up 85% for DoorDash. Absolutely incredible. DoorDash now valued market cap wise more than Kraft Foods. Just think about that. A company that's been
Sure.
around for how long?
And makes money as
And
opposed to
actually makes
DoorDash, which
something.
doesn't. Yeah. Yeah, and actually makes a product. Yeah, and I mean, look, if DoorDash went that hard, Airbnb I think is going to go nuts today. It would be awfully nice to be one of those first employees who got equity, right? But DoorDash again, keeping on this theme of two Americas that we've been talking about, is DoorDash not the perfect example, right? This is a company that makes money, or actually technically loses money, by squeezing restaurants. It's worth $60 billion, and there are thousands of American restaurants that are closing or struggling to keep the lights on every day in this country. It's almost sickening, kind of, to be honest with you. And I'm not saying that DoorDash doesn't provide a service. They do, and it's a service that I even use, so I'm being a hypocrite here. But the fee structure is something that really demands regulatory scrutiny, in my opinion, especially right now.
Right. So for people who aren't familiar, the fee when you order a meal from DoorDash, the fee is as high as 30 to 40%. So think about that. If you're paying $50 for a dinner for two, $15 or more of that goes to DoorDash. DoorDash, by the way, also owns Caviar, if you've ever used that service. Now, in New
Hmm.
York City, the fee is capped during the pandemic to about 20%. Seattle actually capped it at 15%. But restaurants are in a tough spot right now, not only because of the pandemic, but deciding what they want to do, right? Because if you sign on with one of these apps like a DoorDash or a Seamless, they're really popular. You're probably going to get more business. And if you think about your own ordering habits, I know when I lived in Manhattan, I used to just scroll through Seamless. If the restaurant was on it, that became one
Yeah.
of the restaurants I'd possibly order from. If it wasn't, I probably wasn't going to order from there. It was just easier than ordering directly. And then the other option for these restaurants is that they can hold out, right? But then they'll likely miss a lot of customers. And then they also need to figure out their own logistics, right? They need someone to man the phone, take the orders. They need their own delivery people.
Right.
Most restaurants, I think, are saying if you can't beat them, join them. But it is killing their margins, which were basically being demolished anyway because they can't open at full capacity. And
Right.
a lot of people nervous to eat out. So
Restaurant
they're in
margins
a
still,
really
even
rough spot.
yeah, and even without a pandemic, restaurant margins famously, pretty slim. No, it's really that it just really is a good point, and it sort of makes me angry just as knowing people who work in the service industry and seeing restaurants that I love close without any more federal help coming, or at least coming immediately. Um, I'm going to continue to try and do what I said I was going to do earlier this year, which is order directly from these restaurants. And again, at least in New York City, a lot of them now are making it much easier to do it where you can order directly on their website. So I would just recommend that we try and do that when possible.
That's pretty. I mean, we do that actually out here in the burbs because not as many restaurants are listed on Seamless and
Yeah.
all these other services. And we feel better about our order, Carlo. I will say that. Okay, on to politics. President-elect Biden's son, Hunter, says he is now under a federal tax investigation. This probe is reportedly examining multiple financial issues, including whether Hunter Biden and associates violated tax and money laundering laws in business dealings in foreign countries, principally China. This is according to CNN. The president-elect, Biden, has not been implicated in the investigation, which has reportedly been going on since 2018.
I thought we had heard enough about Hunter Biden these last couple of months. It's hard to know what to make of this. I suspect that it is the Trump DOJ sort of like muddying the waters for Biden on day one, so that he sort of comes into power with one of his sons under the cloud of investigation. Especially because, remember, Biden has said that one of his goals is to sort of depoliticize the Department of Justice, which is going to be very hard to do if his son is the target of of a tax investigation. But we shall see. We shall see.
A story that kind of got lost in the shuffle this week, Carlo, it has to do with electric car batteries. And I know this is kind of your wheelhouse. So, Carlo, take it away. I'll let you explain.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the biggest problems for mass electric car adoption has always been that, the batteries that they use, right? Lithium ion batteries, basically bigger versions of the battery that's in your iPhone, they don't last long enough, or they don't have the resilience of like the good old fashioned internal combustion engine. So that is now changing. This week, a battery company named QuantumScape, they revealed data from tests that they're doing on a new kind of battery that they've been developing. This is called a solid state battery. And the cell in these batteries can charge to 80% capacity in 15 minutes. They're non-flammable, and they don't degrade over time nearly as fast as current lithium ion batteries do, whether those batteries, again, are in your iPhone, your computer, or your Tesla, right? So the tests are going to continue, but this is a breakthrough. And it's a big one. It could be a game changer for, getting to a place where electric vehicles can go further, charge faster, and last longer. So it's a really important scientific technological breakthrough that I just wanted to get on the record this week.
I'm glad you mentioned it because there is a lot of things to be optimistic about when it comes to tech in the coming years. You've got AI, nuclear fusion, batteries, solar and wind power, to name a few.
It really is. And, we could probably go, I could at least go all day on this subject. But, for a long time, when you think about it, right, technological advancements have really been these sort of like consumer facing things that like DoorDash, right? Something that makes what was an annoying process a little bit easier. Or a new way to communicate, right, like a Facebook. But there's a lot of reason to think that we're on the precipice of really exciting changes for like big issues, big actual issues that could, affect how we live on Earth. Like what you said, solar. I mean, the fact that solar power has become as cheap as it is, that is a game-changing revelation in this country that's going to change the way we live, and it's really exciting stuff. So I'm glad that we're sort of ending today on a little bit of an optimistic note in an otherwise sort of pessimistic time.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. That's what you need to know for Thursday, December 10th.
Thanks, guys.